one. But I think in terms of the American possible reprisals, if it is clear, and Fred's absolutely right to be cautious in this respect, if it is clear that bin Laden has a connection to this, then of course we're looking at presumably overflying Pakistani territory and possibly conducting some kind of operation, successful or not, in Afghanistan. If that happens, I don't think the ramification necessarily in the Middle East itself need be that huge.
One other aspect of the Middle Eastern situation is that many people believe that Osama bin Laden still has an American connection. He was, after all, set up in business by the Americans against the Soviet Union in Afghanistan in the 80s. There's an Arab saying that the student does not contradict the teacher. And Osama bin Laden is, for many people, still somehow involved in a nebulous way in an American conspiracy. Now, we might find this implausible, particularly after today, but I can assure you...
Distribution of BBC World Service in the United States is by Public Radio International and is made possible by the support of the Capital Group companies, investing for individuals and institutions throughout the world, and sponsor of the American Funds Group of Mutual Funds, and by Upside Financial Network, real-time financial reporting for the technology investor, streamed live and online at upsidefn.com.
that have been condemned in America and around the world. Let's get an update on the news so far.
Huge rescue operations are going on in the United States after a series of coordinated attacks in New York and Washington caused devastation and large loss of life. Two airliners deliberately crashed into the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center in New York. Both buildings collapsed. A third plane then crashed into the Pentagon Defense Headquarters, which is on fire. President Bush said those responsible would be hunted down and punished. There are no indications so far of who is behind the attacks. About 40,000 people normally work inside the World Trade Center building alone, and the attack happened at 9 o'clock in the morning local time. The mayor of New York, Rudolph Giuliani, declared that a tremendous number of people had been killed. National Guard units have been evacuating the whole of the lower part of Manhattan Island. The attacks created chaos and scenes of panic. In Washington, there was a general evacuation of the White House, Congress, and the main government offices. Another airliner, the fourth, crashed in Pennsylvania. The number of people on board that aircraft and the other three missing and believed to have been used in the attacks was more than 260. Many of the militant groups that might come under suspicion for the attacks have denied carrying them out. The Taliban authorities in Afghanistan said the Saudi militant Osama bin Laden didn't have the capability for such a huge operation. But in some Palestinian camps, there were joyful expressions of support for him. The Palestinian leader, Yasser Arafat, said he was completely shocked and sent his condolences to the American people. Britain and Russia condemned the attacks and called emergency government meetings. Pope John Paul said he was shocked by the unspeakable horror of the attacks. All American stock markets closed for the day. The value of the dollar plunged, along with share prices in Europe, and the London stock market tumbled by 5%. Oil prices soared over fears that the attacks could create havoc in the oil fields of the Middle East.
Our time is 32 minutes past 12 noon. You're listening to Classical KUAT-FM 90.5 and 89.7 in Tucson. Continuing coverage, of course, of the events taking place in New York City and Washington today. This from the Associated Press. Arizonans have been turning out by the hundreds to donate blood in Phoenix and Tucson to aid victims of the terrorist attack. The Red Cross in Tucson, however, has canceled all of its blood drives. It continues to take donations at its two blood centers. One is on Broadway, and the other one is at Foothills Mall. Donors have been packing these centers in the past few hours, and officials there say the wait to give blood is as much as 4 to 5 hours. Some other things to tell you about. The Customs Service is on heightened alert status at ports of entry along the U.S.-Mexico border. The Customs Service says that crossing points in Arizona do remain open. The main highway between Arizona and Las Vegas, US 93, is closed at Hoover Dam. It's a precaution due to these terrorist attacks. That means a detour of more than 100 miles for anyone traveling between Arizona and Vegas via Highway 93. Now, the FBI says it has no indication that any sites in Arizona have been targeted for terrorist attacks. However, the FBI and other law enforcement agencies in Arizona are on heightened alert, as are Luke Air Force Base, Davis-Monthan Air Force Base, and Fort Huachuca outside of Sierra Vista. And finally, we have vigils expected. We will give you a complete update of candlelight vigils and other things of that sort in which folks in Tucson may participate in regard to this tragedy. Let's rejoin World News from the BBC. Our time is 12:34. You're listening to Classical KUAT FM.
The car just burst into flames. It was just something out of a horror movie.
I had a perfect view, and the plane was coming in. I noticed it a second before it hit the building. It looked like it was moving slowly, and it lined itself up to hit the building directly.
Big explosion happened. Some guy came out. His skin was all off. I helped him out. This is him all over. There's people jumping out of windows. I've seen at least 14 people jumping out of windows. It's horrific. I can't believe this is happening.
The financial heart of America was under attack, with the upper stories of the two towers burning. Both eventually collapsed in vast clouds of smoke and dust, collapsed into Manhattan. The political heart of the United States was also attacked. A third hijacked airliner was crashed into the Pentagon, the Defense Department in Washington. Part of it also collapsed. How did the hijackers force the pilots to crash their planes the way they wanted? Or were the hijackers themselves pilots? Who in the world could possibly put this coordinated attack together? A question clearly on the mind of the President of the United States, who was swiftly on the air.
Today we've had a national tragedy.